The dust from the stagecoach hadn't even settled when Natalie Thorne watched her father's lawyer hand the deed to their ranch straight over to her uncle, as if 2 decades of her blood and sweat meant nothing at all. Wyoming Territory in the summer of 1878 was harsh enough without the law treating women like children who couldn't own property. But here she stood at 23 years old, watching everything she had worked for slip through her fingers like sand. Her father had built the Circle T ranch from nothing, and she had been beside him every step of the way since her mother died when she was 8, learning to rope cattle, mend fences, break horses, and manage accounts better than most men twice her age. Now he was 6 feet under, killed by a sudden heart attack 3 weeks prior, and the law said unmarried women couldn't inherit land. "This is wrong, Uncle Paul, and you know it," Natalie said, standing in the dusty yard of what had been her home. Her voice didn't shake, though fury burned through her veins like wildfire. She stood tall despite being only 5 feet and 6 inches, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, her riding clothes dusty from a morning spent checking the cattle her father had raised. Paul Thorne had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting his considerable weight from one foot to the other. He was her father's younger brother, a shopkeeper from Cheyenne who had never worked a day on the ranch in his entire life. "The law is the law, Natalie. You know I cannot change that. Besides, a woman has no business running a ranch alone. It is for your own good." "My own good." The words came out sharp as a knife. "I have been running this place for the past 5 years while Father's health declined. Every hand on this ranch takes orders from me. The cattle know my voice. I know every fence line, every water source, every inch of this land." The lawyer, a thin man with spectacles named Mr. Garrison, cleared his throat. "Miss Thorne, perhaps your uncle will allow you to remain in the house or provide you with a suitable dowry to find a husband." "I do not want a husband. I want what is mine." But even as she said it, Natalie knew it was pointless. The law was clear and her choices were limited. She could marry quickly, but that would just transfer ownership to a husband instead of her uncle. She could leave with nothing. Or she could stay and watch her uncle run the ranch into the ground. Paul's face hardened. "You will watch your tone with me, girl. I am the owner now, and I say what happens here. I will give you 1 week to gather your things and make arrangements. I am bringing in a ranch manager from Cheyenne, and I need the main house for him. 1 week. Natalie felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had expected something like this, but hearing it out loud made it real. "What about the hands? Are you keeping them on?" "That is my business now, not yours." She knew what that meant. Paul would hire cheaper labor, men who didn't know the land, and the ranch would suffer. But more importantly, good men who had worked for her father for years would be out of work. That evening, Natalie sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and crimson. The foreman, old Pete, came up the steps slowly. He had to be near 60, with a face like worn leather and eyes that had seen everything the West could throw at a man. "Miss Natalie, the boys wanted me to ask what we should be doing. Your uncle came through earlier, looking at everything like he was counting chickens. He is letting me stay for 1 week, Pete. After that, I have to leave. I do not know what he plans for you and the others." Pete was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. "Your daddy would be spinning in his grave. You are twice the rancher your uncle will ever be. That does not seem to matter much to the law. What will you do?" It was the question that had been eating at her all afternoon. She had a little money saved, but not enough to buy land, even if someone would sell to a woman, which they would not. She could try to find work, but women's work paid a fraction of what men earned, and none of it involved the ranching she loved. "I honestly do not know, Pete. I just do not know." The next morning, Natalie rode out early. needing to clear her head. She took her favorite horse, a buckskin mare named Daisy, and headed toward the northern pasture where the creek ran clear and cold down from the mountains. The summer air was already warm, promising another hot day, but up here in the hills it was still pleasant. She had always done her best thinking on horseback. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the sound of cattle in distress. Her head snapped up, and she urged Daisy forward, cresting a small rise to see a handful of Circle T cattle milling nervously near the creek. A young bull had managed to get himself tangled in old barbed wire, probably left over from a fence repair years ago. He was thrashing, making the wounds worse, blood streaking his dark hide. Natalie dismounted quickly, pulling her wire cutters from her saddlebag. She had dealt with this situation before, but it always required calm hands and careful work. She approached slowly, talking in a low voice, trying to calm the frightened animal. She was nearly to him when she heard hoofbeats. A rider came down from the opposite direction, moving fast. Natalie glanced up, expecting one of the Circle T hands, but this was a stranger. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a worn gray hat and dusty range clothes. As he dismounted in one smooth motion, she got a better look at him. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that needed a cut and several days of stubble on his jaw. His eyes were a striking light blue, startling in his sun-darkened face. "Hold on," he called out. "That bull is about to charge." "I can see that," Natalie shot back. "I have been handling cattle since before I could walk." The man ignored her tone and circled around to the other side of the bull. "If you can keep him steady, I can cut the wire from this side. He is wrapped bad." Natalie wanted to tell him she did not need help, that this was her land and her cattle, but the bull chose that moment to let out a bellow and thrash harder. She swallowed her pride. "All right, on three." They worked together with the practiced efficiency of people who knew cattle and knew danger. The stranger had good hands, quick and sure with his own wire cutters, and he did not spook the animal further. When the last strand of wire fell away, the bull scrambled to his feet and trotted off, bloodied but free. Natalie let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Thank you. That could have gone badly." The man was coiling up the old wire to keep it from hurting anything else. "Could have." "You have good instincts, though. Most women would have been screaming and making it worse." "I am not most women." He looked up at that, and something in his expression shifted, like he was really seeing her for the first time. "No, I suppose you are not. I am Harrison Miller. I am looking for work. Heard there might be something at the Circle T." Natalie's stomach sank. Of course. Another drifter looking for ranch work, and he had no idea he was talking to someone who was about to lose everything. The Circle T just changed ownership. "I do not think they are hiring right now." "That is a shame. Nice spread you have got here." He said it easily, assuming she was part of the owning family, which she supposed she had been until yesterday. "Had," she corrected quietly. "I had a nice spread. It belonged to my father, and now it belongs to my uncle." Harrison studied her face, and she saw understanding dawn. The law, she agreed bitterly. "I am Natalie Thorne, and I have been running this ranch for years, but since I am unmarried and female, I cannot inherit. My uncle took possession yesterday." "That is a raw deal." He said it simply, but there was genuine sympathy in his voice. "What will you do? Everyone keeps asking me that, and I still do not have an answer." She moved to gather up her wire cutters and her gloves. "Where are you coming from, Mr. Miller?" "Harrison, please. I just brought a herd up from Texas. Trail boss released the crew in Cheyenne, and I am looking for something more permanent. Been moving around since I was 17, and I am getting tired of it." "What happened when you were 17? "My parents died. Cholera. I had a younger sister, but she went to live with our aunt back east. I headed west to make my own way." He said it matter-of-factly, but Natalie heard the old pain underneath. They walked back to their horses together. Natalie found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. He moved like a man comfortable in his own skin, confident but not cocky. His hands showed the calluses and scars of real work, and he had handled the bull like someone who knew what he was doing. "The problem with this country," Harrison said suddenly, "is that the laws were written by men who never expected women to want anything besides a husband and a house. My mother ran our farm in Missouri after my father got sick. She was better at it than he ever was, but on paper, it was all his." Natalie looked at him in surprise. Most men do not see it that way. Most men are fools. He swung up into his saddle with easy grace. "I should let you get back. If you hear of any ranches hiring, I would appreciate the word." An idea struck Natalie then, so sudden and wild that she almost dismissed it, but it lodged in her mind and would not let go. "Harrison, wait." He reined his horse around. "Yes. What if I told you I had an idea, a way for me to keep ranching and a way for you to get permanent work?" "I would say I am listening." Natalie took a breath. "There is a land office in Buffalo about 30 miles northeast of here. They have been opening up parcels under the Homestead Act. If you claimed land, you could start your own ranch. And if you needed a partner, someone who knows cattle and ranching and this territory, I could work with you. I have some money saved. Not much, but enough to help get started." Harrison's expression was unreadable. "You would want to partner with a man you just met." "I would want to partner with someone who needs what I have, and who has what I need. You need knowledge and experience. I need the legal right to claim land, which I can only get through a man." The words tasted bitter, but they were true. "We could draw up a real partnership agreement, legal and binding. Equal shares, equal say." "Why would I agree to that when I could just claim the land myself and hire you as a hand?" It was a fair question, and Natalie had to respect him for asking it directly. "Because I would not work for you as a hired hand, not when I have the skills to be a full partner. And because you look like a man who values fairness, or you would not have said what you did about your mother." "Am I wrong?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face. "This would be a business arrangement, completely. I am not looking for a husband, Mr. Miller. I am looking for a way to do the work I was born to do." "Harrison," he corrected again, "if we are going to be partners, you should use my name." He held out his hand. "Let us go to Buffalo and see what land is available. If we can find something workable, we will talk terms." Natalie shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip and the calluses that matched her own. "We leave tomorrow morning." That night, Natalie packed a saddlebag with essentials and counted out her savings. She had $300, earned from selling her leather work and breeding a few horses on the side. It was not a fortune, but it was hers, earned with her own hands. She also had her father's Winchester rifle, her own gear, and Daisy. It would have to be enough. Old Pete found her in the barn before dawn. "Miss Natalie, tell me you are not doing something foolish." "That depends on your definition of foolish, Pete." She was checking Daisy's hooves, making sure the mare was ready for the journey. Running off with a stranger might qualify. "I am not running off. I am going to Buffalo to file a homestead claim with a potential business partner. It is all very proper." She straightened up and looked at the old foreman. "Pete, I cannot stay here and watch my uncle destroy what father built, and I cannot sit in some boarding house in town doing needlework. This might be crazy, but it is a chance." Pete shook his head slowly. "Your daddy taught you to trust your gut." "I just hope your gut is right about this Harrison Miller." "So do I." Harrison was waiting at the bend in the road where they had agreed to meet, sitting easy in his saddle. He had a pack horse with him, loaded with supplies. When he saw Natalie approaching, he nodded. "Ready, ready." They rode through the morning, following the road northeast toward Buffalo. The land opened up around them, vast and rolling, dotted with sage and cut through with creek beds. The mountains rose blue and distant to the west. It was beautiful country, hard country, the kind of place that would break weak people. "Tell me about the Circle T," Harrison said after they had been riding for an hour. "How big is the operation?" "We run about 800 head of cattle, mostly Herefords. 3,000 acres of deeded land, plus we have access to open range. Good water from the creek and 2 springs. My father started with nothing 20 years ago, just him and my mother and $100. He built it into something real." Natalie heard the pride in her own voice and did not try to hide it. "And you helped." "Every day since I was old enough to sit a horse. When my mother died, I became his right hand. I learned everything he could teach me. How to judge beef weight by eye, how to spot a sick animal before it infects the herd, when to sell and when to hold. I can deliver a breech calf, set a broken leg, negotiate with buyers." She paused. "Not that any of that matters to the law. It matters," Harrison said quietly. "Just because the law is stupid does not mean your skills are not valuable. You know what you are talking about. I could hear it in your voice when you spoke about that bull yesterday. You were not scared, just focused on solving the problem. Were you testing me? Maybe a little." He shot her a sideways glance. "I wanted to see if you were the kind of woman who could handle the work, or if you just thought you could. There is a difference. And what did you decide?" "That you handle yourself just fine." "That still does not mean this partnership will work. But at least I know you are not some city woman with romantic notions about ranching." They stopped to rest the horses near midday, finding shade near a creek. Harrison had packed coffee and biscuits, and they ate in companionable silence. Natalie found herself studying him again. He had the deep tan of a man who lived outdoors, and his hands were never still, always checking gear or adjusting something. A working man through and through. "You said you came up from Texas," she said. "Did you work ranches down there?" "Several. Started as a wrangler, worked my way up to trail boss on my last drive. Good money, but hard living. Months on the trail, sleeping on the ground, eating dust. I want a place of my own, something I can build." He looked out across the landscape. "This country is still wild enough that a man can make something of himself if he is willing to work. And a woman, not by law, which is why you need me." He said it without arrogance, just stating a fact, but in practice. "If you are as good as you say you are, I do not see why we cannot build something together. I know cattle, you know this territory. Seems like we could make it work." "Equal partners," Natalie pressed. "I need your word on that, Harrison. I will not go from being under my uncle's thumb to being your hired hand." He met her eyes directly. "Equal partners. Same authority, same profits, same risks. I do not see the point in having a partner if I am not going to listen to them. We will disagree sometimes, probably often, but we will make decisions together. How do we handle it if we cannot agree? We keep talking until we find a middle ground, or we try it one way and adjust if it does not work." He finished his coffee and stood. "Look, Natalie, I am not going to lie to you. This is going to be hard. Starting from scratch always is. But I think it beats the alternative for both of us." They reached Buffalo by late afternoon. The town was small but growing, with a main street of wooden buildings and dirt roads. The land office was a modest building near the hotel, and they tied their horses outside. The clerk, a balding man with ink-stained fingers, looked up when they entered. "Help you folks?" Harrison stepped forward. "I want to file a homestead claim. What parcels do you have available in this area?" The clerk pulled out a large survey map and spread it on the counter. We have got several sections open. Most of it is northeast of town, up toward the mountains. Good grassland, some water sources. You will need to prove up on 160 acres, build a dwelling, farm at least 10 acres, and live on it for 5 years. Natalie leaned over the map, studying the parcels. Her practiced eye picked out the best options immediately. This one, she said, pointing to a section that bordered a creek. This has water access and what looks like good grazing land. Is that still available? The clerk nodded. It is. You are the gentleman's wife. No, Natalie said firmly. I am his business partner. The clerk's eyebrows rose, but he was smart enough not to comment. Harrison said, What do I need to do to file? $10 filing fee, your signature on the claim form, and a sworn statement that you intend to fulfill the requirements. Are you a citizen, born in Missouri? 28 years old, unmarried, no criminal record. The paperwork took an hour, but by the time they left the land office, Harrison Miller was the legal claimant on 160 acres of Wyoming Territory. They found a lawyer next, a man named Mr. Ferguson who worked out of a cramped office above the general store. We need a partnership agreement drawn up, Harrison explained. Legal and binding. 2 equal partners in a ranching operation with all decisions and profits split 50-50. Mr. Ferguson looked between them, clearly surprised. That is an unusual arrangement. But legal, Natalie pressed. Provided both parties are of sound mind and enter into it willingly, yes, I can draw up a contract that specifies the terms. You will both need to sign it, and I will file it with the county. If either party breaks the agreement, the other has legal recourse. How long will it take? Harrison asked. I can have it ready tomorrow morning. They took rooms at the hotel for the night. Natalie lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she had lost her mind. She was trusting a man she barely knew, heading off to start a ranch from nothing, with no guarantee it would work. But the alternative was returning to the Circle T to watch her uncle destroy it, or trying to find work in town doing laundry or cooking. Neither option was acceptable. She thought about her father, about the talks they had when she was younger. He had always told her she was as capable as any man, but he had also been realistic about the world she lived in. You will have to be twice as good to get half as much respect, he had said. And even then, some people will never see past your sex. But that does not mean you give up, Natalie. It means you work harder and prove them wrong. She intended to do exactly that. The next morning, she met Harrison for breakfast in the hotel dining room. He looked like he had slept about as well as she had, but his eyes were clear and determined. Still in? He asked. Still in? You. I do not make a habit of backing out once I have given my word. They signed the partnership agreement in Mr. Ferguson's office at 9 o'clock. The terms were clear. Equal ownership of all assets, equal authority in all decisions, equal division of profits. If either partner died, their share would go to their heirs, but the partnership would continue if possible. If either partner wanted to dissolve the arrangement, they had to give 6 months' notice, and the assets would be divided fairly. This is binding, Mr. Ferguson said as they signed. Are you both certain? Certain, Natalie said. Certain, Harrison echoed. They shook hands over the desk, and just like that, Natalie was a ranch owner again. Or at least half owner of a ranch that did not exist yet beyond lines on a survey map. Now comes the hard part, Harrison said as they walked back to the hotel. We need to figure out what we need and what we can afford. They spent the rest of the morning planning. Natalie's $300 and Harrison's savings of $200 gave them $500 to work with. They needed lumber for a cabin, basic tools, fence wire, seed for the required farming, and enough supplies to get through the first months. And they needed cattle. I can get cattle, Natalie said. "Not from the Circle T, but I know other ranchers around here who would sell to me at a fair price. If we can get the cabin built and fencing started, I can probably negotiate for 20 or 30 head to start, with payment after we sell next year. That is a lot of debt to take on right away. It is ranching. You cannot run a ranch without cattle." She pulled out a pencil and paper and started doing figures. "If we keep costs low, build the cabin ourselves, and are smart about what we buy, we can do this. It will be tight, but possible." Harrison studied her calculations. "You are good with numbers. I kept all the books for the Circle T. I know how to stretch a dollar." She looked up at him. "We will be living rough for the first year at least. Are you prepared for that? I have been sleeping on the ground for the past 4 months. A cabin will feel like a palace." They bought supplies in Buffalo, loading up the packhorse with tools, nails, seed, flour, beans, and coffee. Natalie purchased a good cook stove, knowing that the ability to cook and stay warm through the winter would make the difference between surviving and failing. They bought enough lumber for a small cabin, to be delivered to the claim site within the week. By the time they rode out toward their new land, it was late afternoon. Natalie felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. Everything she owned was tied to her saddle or riding the packhorse. She was putting all her faith in a man she had known for 2 days, and a piece of paper that said they were partners. The land was beautiful. The survey map led them to a creek-fed valley with good grass and natural shelter from the worst weather. Mountains rose to the west, and the land rolled away to the east in endless waves. There were pines near the creek and plenty of grazing land. "This will do," Harrison said, and Natalie heard satisfaction in his voice. "This will more than do." They made camp that night beside the creek, building a fire and cooking a simple meal of beans and bacon. The stars came out in a vast sweep overhead, and coyotes sang in the distance. Natalie sat by the fire, drinking coffee and feeling the weight of what she had done settling over her. "Having second thoughts?" Harrison asked. "Yes, but I am having them about staying, not about leaving." She poked at the fire with a stick. "The Circle T was my home for my entire life. Now it belongs to my uncle, and I am sitting in the middle of nowhere with a stranger. Fair enough. I am sitting in the middle of nowhere with a woman I barely know, about to build a ranch from scratch. We are both crazy. Probably." She smiled despite herself. "My father used to say that anything worth having was worth working for. I guess we are about to find out if he was right." "Tell me about him," Harrison said. "Your father, I mean." So Natalie talked and Harrison listened, and the fire burned down to embers. She told him about learning to ride when she was barely big enough to reach the stirrups, about helping her father deliver calves in the middle of winter storms, about the pride on his face when she successfully negotiated the sale of 50 head to a buyer who had tried to cheat them. She told him about the last conversation they had, just a few days before he died, when he had said he was proud of her and wished the law was different. "He sounds like he was a good man," Harrison said when she finished. "He was. I wish you could have met him." "I wish I could have too." The lumber wagon arrived 3 days later. By then, Harrison had already paced out the cabin site, choosing a spot near the creek with good drainage and natural windbreak from a stand of pines. They had cleared brush and started digging the foundation posts. "Ever built a cabin before?" Harrison asked as they unloaded planks. "Helped build a bunkhouse once. You built a barn in Texas. Between us, we should be able to figure it out." It took them 2 weeks of dawn to dusk work to build the cabin. It was small, just 1 room with a loft, but it was solid. Harrison proved to be good with his hands, and Natalie had enough experience with tools to keep up. They worked well together, falling into a rhythm where one would start a task, and the other would anticipate what was needed next. They argued once, about the placement of the windows. Harrison wanted them facing east to catch the morning light. Natalie insisted they needed to face south for warmth in winter. They finally compromised on 2 windows, one in each direction. "See," Harrison said as they installed the second window, "partners finding middle ground. Or partners both being too stubborn to admit the other is right." He laughed at that, and Natalie found she liked his laugh. It was genuine, without mockery or meanness. She had been around enough men to know the difference. By the time the cabin was finished, they had fallen into a routine. Harrison was up first, getting the fire going and starting coffee. Natalie was better at cooking, so she handled breakfast and dinner. They worked side by side during the day, taking breaks only when the heat got unbearable. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, sharing stories about their pasts and their plans for the future. Natalie found herself relaxing around him in a way she had not expected. Harrison treated her like an equal in word and deed. When she made a suggestion, he listened and considered it. When he disagreed, he said so clearly, and they talked it through. There was no posturing, no attempts to assert dominance or put her in her place. It was refreshing and strange and a little frightening, because she was starting to trust him. "We need to start fencing," Natalie said one evening. They had been on the claim for 3 weeks, and the cabin was done. "The lumber can be delivered, but we should start with the most critical areas. The creek access, definitely, and a paddock near the cabin for horses." "Agreed." "And we need to talk about cattle. How soon can you make that happen?" "I was thinking of riding over to the Morrison Ranch tomorrow. Jack Morrison was a friend of my father's, and he runs good stock. I think he would be willing to sell us some heifers and a bull on credit." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Natalie, are you sure? Taking on debt right away is risky." "Everything about this is risky, but we cannot wait a year to get cattle. We need them breeding and calving if we are going to have anything to sell." She met his eyes. "Trust me on this. I know Morrison, and I know the cattle business here. This is the right move." "Then I trust you. You handle the cattle, and I will start on the fencing." Natalie rode to the Morrison Ranch the next day. It was a good spread, well-maintained, with healthy-looking cattle in the pastures. Jack Morrison was in his 50s, a weathered man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Natalie Thorne," he said when she rode up, "I heard about your father. I am sorry for your loss. He was a good man." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I appreciate that." "I also heard your uncle took over the Circle T. How are you faring?" "That is actually why I am here." Natalie dismounted and followed him to the porch of his ranch house. His wife brought out lemonade, and Natalie explained the situation. She told them about the homestead claim, about the partnership with Harrison, about their plans to start their own ranch. Morrison listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "That is quite an undertaking. Starting from scratch is never easy." "I know, sir. But I also know cattle, and I know this land. I would not be asking if I did not think we could make it work." She took a breath. "I am hoping you might be willing to sell us 20 head of heifers and a good bull on credit until we have something to sell. I am prepared to pay fair market price plus interest. You are asking me to take a gamble on a brand new operation. I am asking you to bet on someone you know. You knew my father, Mr. Morrison. You know how he raised me. I am not going to fail because I do not know what I am doing. If I fail, it will be because of bad luck or bad weather, and that can happen to anyone." Morrison's wife, Sarah, spoke up. "Jack, remember when we started? Your father would not lend us money, said we would fail within a year." "I remember." Morrison looked at Natalie with new respect. "All right, Miss Thorne. I will sell you 20 bred heifers and a bull. Payment due after your first sale next year plus 10% interest. But I want to meet this partner of yours, make sure he is not some drifter who will take off with my cattle." "That is more than fair." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Call me Jack. If we are doing business together, we should be on friendly terms." Harrison rode to the Morrison ranch with her the following week. Natalie watched nervously as the two men sized each other up. Jack asked Harrison about his experience, his plans, his commitment to the venture. Harrison answered honestly, not trying to oversell himself or make promises he could not keep. Finally, Jack nodded. "You seem like a straight shooter, Mr. Miller. And if Natalie trusts you, that counts for something. We have a deal." They shook hands, and just like that, they were real ranchers. The cattle would be delivered in 2 weeks, giving them time to get the paddock fence finished and prepare. The work was endless. Harrison built fence while Natalie worked on getting the required farming done. The Homestead Act required them to cultivate at least 10 acres, so she planted hay near the creek where the soil was good. It was back-breaking work, and her hands developed new blisters on top of old calluses. But it was her work on her land, building something that belonged to her. That made every aching muscle worth it. The cattle arrived on a hot day in late August. Jack Morrison himself brought them over with 2 of his hands, driving the herd carefully. The heifers were good quality, mostly Herefords with a few Angus mixed in. The bull was a fine animal, young and strong. "I am betting on you, Natalie," Jack said as they got the cattle settled. "Do not let me down." "I will not, sir. You have my word." After Jack left, Harrison and Natalie stood at the paddock fence watching their cattle graze. Their cattle. It felt surreal. "We really did it," Harrison said quietly. "We are ranchers. We are." Natalie felt a smile spreading across her face. "Now we just have to keep them alive through the winter and hope they all calve successfully next spring." "Is that all?" But Harrison was smiling too. As summer faded into fall, they settled into the rhythm of ranch life. The cattle grazed and fattened on the good grass. The cabin stayed warm with the new stove. They cut and stored hay for the winter, working from dawn until dark to get enough put by. Harrison proved to be as tireless a worker as Natalie, never complaining about the long hours or hard conditions. They also learned each other's quirks and habits. Harrison was methodical, wanting to plan everything carefully before acting. Natalie was more intuitive, trusting her instincts and adjusting as needed. They balanced each other well. One evening in September, as they sat by the fire after a particularly long day of haying, Harrison said, "I have been thinking about a brand. We need to register one." "I was thinking about that too. What did you have in mind?" "Well, your father had the Circle T. What if we did something similar? 2 symbols representing both of us," Natalie considered. "The HN brand, your initial and mine. Simple, hard to alter, easy to read. I like it. Equal partners, equal representation." They registered the HN brand in Buffalo the following week, and Natalie felt another piece click into place. They were building something real, something lasting. October brought the first serious cold snap. They woke one morning to frost covering everything, the grass crunching underfoot. The cattle were handling it well, their coats already starting to thicken for winter, but it was a reminder that the hard season was coming. They butchered one of the chickens Natalie had bought from a farmer near Buffalo, and she made a proper dinner with biscuits and gravy. They ate at the small table Harrison had built, the cabin warm from the stove, and Natalie realized she was content. More than content. She was happy. "This feels like home," she said without planning to. Then she felt her cheeks heat, worried it sounded too sentimental, but Harrison just nodded. "It does. I have not felt at home anywhere since my parents died. This is different. This is ours." "Thank you," Natalie said, "for keeping your word about the partnership, for treating me as an equal. It means more than you know." "You do not need to thank me for basic decency, Natalie. You are pulling your weight and then some. I would be a fool not to recognize that." Their eyes met across the table, and Natalie felt something shift between them. It was subtle, just a change in the air, but it was there. She looked away first, confused by her own reaction. She had not wanted a husband. She had wanted a partner, a business arrangement. But Harrison was becoming something more than just a business partner, and that scared her. Winter came hard and fast in November. The snow started in earnest, piling up against the cabin and covering the grazing land. The cattle huddled near the trees for shelter, and Harrison and Natalie took turns breaking ice on the creek so they could drink. They went through their stored hay faster than planned, and Natalie worried they would run short. "We will make it," Harrison said one night as they reviewed their supplies. "It will be tight, but we will make it." They were snowed in for 3 days during a blizzard in December. The wind howled around the cabin and snow piled to the windows. They had no choice but to stay inside, feeding the stove and trying to stay warm. It was the first time they had been confined in such close quarters with nothing to do but talk and wait. "Tell me about your sister," Natalie said on the second day. They were both sitting near the stove, drinking coffee and listening to the wind. "You said she went back east." "Emma. She is 5 years younger than me. She was only 12 when our parents died." Harrison stared into his coffee cup. "I wanted to keep her with me, but I had nothing. No money, no home, no prospects. Our aunt wrote and offered to take her, give her a proper education and a chance at a good life. It about killed me to let her go, but it was the right thing to do. Do you hear from her? Letters when they can find me. She is doing well, last I heard. Learning to be a teacher. She wants to come west when she finishes school, but I keep telling her to stay where it is safe and civilized. Does she listen?" Harrison smiled slightly. "She is as stubborn as I am, so probably not. I should write and tell her about the ranch, let her know I have an address now." "You should. She would probably like to know her brother is settled." Natalie hesitated, then added, "She would be welcome here if she does come west. We will have a real operation going by then." "That is generous of you. She is your family. This is half your ranch. Of course she would be welcome." The blizzard finally broke on the 4th day, and they dug their way out to check on the cattle. They had lost 2 heifers found frozen near the creek. It was a blow, but not a catastrophic one. The rest of the herd had survived. 18 head left, Natalie said, doing the math. "If they all calve successfully, we will have 36 animals by summer, enough to sell some and still build the herd. Assuming they all calve successfully." "They will. They are good stock, healthy animals. We just need to get them through the rest of winter." January and February were brutal. They lived in their heavy coats, layering everything they could to stay warm. The cabin helped, but on the worst nights they could see their breath even inside. They took to sleeping with all their blankets piled on, and more than once they woke to find frost on the inside of the windows. But they survived. The cattle survived. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, the days started getting longer. March brought a thaw, and with it, hope. The snow began to melt, revealing brown grass underneath. The cattle started moving around more, no longer just huddling for warmth, and the heifers started showing clear signs of being close to calving. "Here we go," Natalie said one morning, spotting the first heifer in early labor. "This is where we find out if we really know what we are doing." They lost 2 calves, both stillborn, but the rest came healthy and strong. By mid-April, they had 16 new calves wobbling around on spindly legs. Natalie checked them obsessively, making sure they were nursing and gaining weight properly. "You are going to wear yourself out," Harrison said one evening when she came in from her 3rd check of the day. "They are doing fine. I know, but I cannot help worrying. If we lose calves now, after getting through the winter, I will lose my mind." "Natalie, sit down." Harrison guided her to a chair. "We have worked non-stop for 8 months. The cattle are healthy. The ranch is functioning. You need to take a breath." She realized he was right. She had been running on nerves and determination for so long that she had forgotten how to relax. "I am sorry. I am just scared something will go wrong." "Something probably will go wrong eventually. That is ranching. But we will handle it, same as we have handled everything else." He handed her a cup of coffee. "We make a good team, you and I." "We do." She looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he was not the stranger he had been 8 months ago. She knew the scar on his left hand was from a bad rope burn in Texas. She knew he liked his coffee black and his eggs scrambled. She knew he hummed when he was concentrating on a task, and that he had a temper but never let it get out of control. She knew him, and somewhere along the way, she had started caring about him beyond just their partnership. The realization should have scared her, but instead it felt right. Natural, like the change of seasons. May brought warm weather and green grass. The cattle thrived, the calves grew, and the ranch felt like it was truly coming alive. They branded the calves with the HN brand, working together to heat the irons and handle the bawling youngsters. It was hot, dirty work, but satisfying. "Next year, we will have to hire help for this," Harrison said, wiping sweat from his face. "We are getting too big to handle everything ourselves." "That is a good problem to have." They rode into Buffalo in early June to check on supplies and pick up mail. There was a letter waiting for Harrison from his sister, and one for Natalie from old Pete. She opened it sitting on the hotel porch while Harrison read his own letter. "Dear Miss Natalie," Pete wrote in his careful script, "I hope this finds you well. Things at the Circle T are not good. Your uncle fired most of the old hands and brought in cheaper men. The cattle are not being properly cared for, and I heard he already lost a dozen head to disease. I quit last month, could not stand to watch what he is doing to your father's work. I am working at the Johnson Ranch now, but I wanted you to know I am available if you need a hand. You were always a better boss than most men I have worked for. Pete." Natalie read the letter twice, feeling anger and sadness mixed together. She had known her uncle would run the ranch into the ground, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. "Bad news?" Harrison asked, looking up from his own letter. "My uncle is destroying the Circle T. Pete quit and offered to come work for us if we need him." "Do we?" Natalie thought about it. "Maybe not right now, but soon, if we keep growing, we will need help, and I trust Pete completely. Then we will hire him when we are ready. Emma says she is coming west in July," Harrison added. "She finished her teaching certificate and got a position at a school in Buffalo. She will be here in 2 months. That is wonderful. You must be excited to see her." "I am, and nervous. I have not seen her in 11 years. She was a child when she left. Now she is a grown woman." "She will be proud of you, Harrison. You have built something good here." He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "We built something good. I could not have done this without you." They celebrated the 4th of July by taking a rare day off. Harrison caught fish from the creek, and Natalie baked bread in their small oven. They sat outside as the sun set, eating fresh fish and warm bread and feeling like the wealthiest people in the world. "I have been thinking," Harrison said, as the sky turned orange and pink. "About the partnership agreement." Natalie's stomach clenched. Was he unhappy with their arrangement? "What about it?" "It has a clause about what happens if one of us dies. Our share goes to our heirs, but neither of us has any heirs. Your sister. She is pursuing her own life. I would not want to burden her with a ranch, and besides, that is not really what I am talking about." He set down his plate and turned to face her fully. "Natalie, somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a business arrangement for me. I value you as a partner, but I have also come to value you as a person, as a friend, as more than a friend if I am being honest." Natalie's heart was suddenly beating very fast. Harrison, I do not want you to feel obligated to say these things just because we live in close quarters. I do not feel obligated. I feel honest. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. I know you did not want a husband when we started this. You wanted independence and equality, and I respect that. But I am hoping maybe your feelings have changed the way mine have. Because I am in love with you, Natalie, and I have been for months now. She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. But all she saw was sincerity and hope, and a vulnerability that made her chest ache. I was so determined not to need anyone, she said quietly. My whole life, I saw what happened to women who gave up everything for a man. I swore I would never do that, but you never asked me to give up anything. You made me your equal in every way. And somewhere in all of that, I fell in love with you too. Harrison's face broke into a smile, real and bright and full of joy. Really, really. She squeezed his hand. I love you. I think I have for a while, but I was too scared to admit it. What were you scared of? That it would change things. That we would lose what we built. That you would use my feelings against me. I would never do that. We are partners first, Natalie. That does not change just because we love each other. You still own half this ranch. You still have equal say in every decision. All that changes is that now I get to do this. He leaned in and kissed her, gentle and careful, asking permission even as he gave it. Natalie kissed him back, feeling like something that had been locked tight inside her was finally opening. His lips were warm and soft despite the rough stubble on his jaw. One hand came up to cup her cheek, tender in a way that made her feel precious. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. That was worth waiting for, Harrison said with a slightly dazed expression. Natalie laughed, surprised by how light she felt. Yes, it was. Marry me, Harrison said suddenly. Not because the law says you should, and not because it changes anything about our partnership. Marry me because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life building this ranch and this life with you. Yes. The word came without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. They kissed again, longer this time, and Natalie thought about how far she had come. A year ago, she had been losing everything. Now she had a ranch, a partnership, and a man who loved her without trying to own her. It felt like a miracle. They were married in Buffalo 3 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the church with Jack and Sarah Morrison as witnesses. Natalie wore a new dress, the first one she had bought in years, a simple blue cotton that matched her eyes. Harrison wore his good shirt and looked nervous enough to make her smile. I do, she said when the preacher asked if she took this man. I do, Harrison echoed, his voice strong and sure. The kiss they shared in front of the preacher was chaste and brief, but the promise behind it was enormous. They filed the marriage papers and amended their partnership agreement to reflect that they were now married partners, each still retaining equal ownership and authority. Congratulations, the lawyer said, looking between them with something like admiration. You two have built something unusual here. I hope it works out. It will, Natalie said, taking Harrison's hand. We are making sure of that. Emma arrived in late July, stepping off the stage in Buffalo with 2 trunks and a bright smile. She was lovely, with Harrison's blue eyes and dark hair, and at 23, she carried herself with confidence. When she saw her brother, she dropped everything and ran to him, and Harrison caught her up in a hug that made Natalie's eyes prick with tears. You look so different, Emma said, pulling back to study him. All grown up and respectable. I am a married rancher now, Harrison said, drawing Natalie forward. Emma, this is my wife, Natalie. Natalie, my sister, Emma. Emma looked Natalie up and down and then smiled. Harrison wrote and told me about the partnership. I think it is wonderful. He also said you are a better rancher than most men he has met. Did he now? Natalie shot her husband an amused look. It is true, Harrison said, unrepentant. I am not going to lie about it. Emma settled into the cabin with ease. She was starting her teaching position in September, but until then, she wanted to learn about the ranch. Natalie took her under her wing, showing her how to milk the cow they had bought, how to feed the chickens, how to check the cattle for signs of illness. Emma was a quick study and not afraid of hard work. I like her, Natalie told Harrison one night after Emma had gone to sleep in the loft. They were in their own small bedroom, added onto the cabin as a wedding present to themselves. She has your determination. She likes you too. She told me I am lucky to have found someone who does not put up with my nonsense. Harrison pulled her close, and Natalie relaxed into his embrace. In the 3 months since their wedding, they had learned each other in this new way too. The physical intimacy had been awkward at first, both of them inexperienced, but they had figured it out together with patience and humor. You do have a lot of nonsense, Natalie teased, and yet you married me anyway. I must be crazy. You are, but so am I. That is why we work. August brought roundup time. They needed to sell some of their cattle to pay off their debt to Jack Morrison and have operating money for the next year. With Emma watching the homestead, Harrison and Natalie drove a dozen steers to the sale in Buffalo. They got a fair price, better than Natalie had hoped, and walked away with enough money to pay Morrison in full with plenty left over. We did it, Natalie said as they rode back home. We made it through the first year and we are showing a profit. You sound surprised. I am a little. So many things could have gone wrong. They still can, but we will handle them together just like we handle everything else. Harrison reached over and squeezed her hand. I meant what I said, Natalie. I could not have done this without you. This ranch exists because of both of us. She knew he meant it, and that made all the difference. Autumn brought cooler weather and the satisfaction of work well done. They had 32 head of cattle now, counting the calves they had kept for breeding. They had a functioning ranch with a cabin, fences, and winter stores. They had each other. It felt like more than Natalie had ever dreamed of having. Old Pete came to work for them in October, grateful for the job and the chance to work for people he respected. With his help, they expanded their operation, repairing and extending fence lines, building a small bunkhouse for him to live in, and making plans for the next year. You are doing good work here, Pete said one evening. Your daddy would be proud of you, Miss Natalie. Thank you, Pete. That means a lot. Winter came again, but this year they were prepared. They had plenty of hay stored, the cattle were in good condition, and the cabin was tight and warm. When the snow came, they weathered it together, Harrison and Natalie and Emma and Pete, working as a team to keep the ranch running. Spring of 1880 brought more calves, 16 this time, all healthy. The herd was growing and so was their reputation. Other ranchers in the area had heard about the partnership between Harrison and Natalie, and while some were skeptical, most were impressed by the results they were seeing. In April, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she finally told Harrison, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. We are having a baby, he said, setting her down carefully. Natalie, we are having a baby. We are. Are you happy? Happy. I am over the moon, a little terrified, but mostly happy. He kissed her soundly. You are going to be an amazing mother. I do not know about that. I know more about calves than babies. We will figure it out together. That seems to be what we do best. The pregnancy was not easy. Natalie was sick for weeks in the beginning, barely able to keep anything down. Harrison took over more of the ranch work, insisting she rest, and Emma helped with the household chores. By summer, the sickness had passed, and Natalie felt better, though she tired more easily than before. "I hate feeling useless," she complained one evening. She was sitting on the porch, watching Harrison and Pete bring in the horses for the night. Her belly was starting to show, and she felt large and ungainly. "You are not useless," Harrison said, sitting beside her. "You are growing our child. That is important work." "It does not feel like work. It feels like I am just sitting around while you do everything." "You grew a whole ranch from nothing while doing physical labor most men could not handle. You are allowed to take it easy for a few months." He put his arm around her shoulders. "Besides, I like taking care of you. Let me do this." Their son was born in December, on a snowy night when the world outside was silent and white. The labor was long and painful, and there were moments when Natalie was scared. But Emma was there, and Sarah Morrison came to help, and in the end, she held a squalling, red-faced baby boy in her arms. "He is perfect," Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. He was holding her hand so tightly it hurt, but Natalie did not care. "Natalie, he is perfect." They named him Thomas, after Natalie's father, with the middle name of Henry after Harrison's father. Thomas Henry Miller came into the world with a strong pair of lungs and a determination that made his parents laugh through their exhausted tears. "He is going to be a handful," Emma predicted, looking at her nephew with fond amusement. "Good," Natalie said, stroking the baby's soft cheek. "The world needs more people who refuse to give up." The next few years passed in a blur of work and growth. The ranch prospered. They added more cattle, bought adjoining land when it became available, and built a proper ranch house to replace the small cabin. Thomas grew into a lively toddler who wanted to be everywhere and into everything. Emma continued teaching and eventually married a farmer from nearby, staying close enough to visit often. In the spring of 1883, Natalie gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. 2 years after that, another son arrived, James, who was quieter than his siblings but just as determined. The HN Ranch became known throughout the territory as a well-run operation. Other ranchers respected Harrison's fair dealing and Natalie's skill with cattle. The partnership that had started as a desperate gamble had become something strong and lasting. On a warm evening in June of 1885, Natalie stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching Harrison play with their 3 children in the yard. Thomas was 7 now, teaching his younger siblings how to rope a fence post. Rose was squealing with laughter, and James was watching intently, determined to learn. "Hard to believe it has been 7 years," Emma said, joining her on the porch. She was pregnant with her second child, glowing with health and happiness. "It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all," Natalie agreed. "Sometimes I think about that day I met Harrison when we were both helping that bull. If someone had told me then that we would build all this, I would not have believed them. You took a huge risk, trusting a stranger." "We both did, but it paid off in ways I never imagined." Natalie watched her husband swing Rose up onto his shoulders while Thomas showed James the proper way to hold a rope. "I thought I just wanted independence and the right to work the land I loved. I got that, but I also got a partner who makes everything better, a family, a real home. You and Harrison are good together, you balance each other." "We do." Natalie smiled as Harrison caught her eye and waved. She waved back, her heart full. "We really do." That night, after the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, Harrison and Natalie sat on their porch swing, watching the stars come out. It was a ritual they had maintained for years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "I was thinking," Harrison said, his arm around her shoulders, "we should hire another hand or two. The ranch is getting big enough that Pete cannot handle everything alone." "I was thinking the same thing. Maybe we can find some young men looking to learn the trade. Pete could teach them properly." "Agreed." Harrison was quiet for a moment, then added, "I got a letter from Jack Morrison today. He said there is some land opening up to our west, about 300 acres. He thought we might be interested in expanding." "Are you?" "Only if you are. We are doing well as we are. We do not need more land." Natalie considered. The ranch was successful, but there was always room to grow, and she knew that Harrison, like her, was never satisfied with standing still. "Let us look at the land. If it is good grazing and the price is right, we should consider it." "Equal partners," Harrison said, kissing the top of her head. Still and always," Natalie echoed. "Though I think we are more than just partners now. What are we? Family? Team? Best friends who happen to run a ranch together?" She tilted her head to look at him. "I love you, Harrison Miller." "I love you too, Natalie Miller." He kissed her properly then, sweet and lingering. "Thank you for taking a chance on me 7 years ago. Thank you for treating me as an equal when no one else would, for seeing me as a person, not just a woman. You made it easy. You are one of the most capable people I have ever met, and I am not just saying that because you are my wife." They sat in comfortable silence, rocking gently on the swing, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Somewhere out in the darkness, the cattle were settling in for the night. In the barn, the horses were dozing. Inside the house, their children were dreaming. It was peaceful and perfect, the life they had built together through hard work and mutual respect. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. The children grew. Thomas learned to ride almost before he could walk properly, and he took to ranching like he was born to it. Rose was more interested in the business side, always asking about prices and profits and how to negotiate better deals. James loved the animals themselves, spending hours just watching the cattle and horses, learning their personalities and quirks. In 1888, they expanded the ranch again, buying that western parcel and adding another 100 head of cattle. They built a second bunkhouse and hired 3 more hands, young men who were eager to learn. Pete became the head foreman, respected by everyone who worked on the HN. Natalie's uncle sold the Circle T in 1889, after running it into debt. The new owner was a sharp businessman from the East who turned it around within 2 years. It was bittersweet for Natalie, seeing what had been her father's ranch prosper under someone else's management, but she had let go of most of the bitterness by then. She had her own ranch, her own family, her own success. The past was the past. In the early 1890s, the territory of Wyoming achieved statehood, and with it came new laws. Women gained the right to vote in Wyoming long before most other states, a source of pride for Natalie. She and Harrison rode into Buffalo together to cast their ballots in the first state election, a moment that felt symbolic of how far they had come. "Imagine if we had waited for the law to change before starting the ranch," Harrison said as they rode home afterward. "We would have lost years." "We made our own way, laws or no laws," Natalie replied. "That is what people do out here. They build what they need and worry about the paperwork later." On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1881, Harrison had given Natalie something unexpected, a revised partnership agreement. When she opened the document, confused, he explained, "When we first drew up our partnership, you needed me to claim the land because the law would not let you. That is not entirely true anymore, and even where it is, you have proven yourself 100 times over. This new agreement puts the ranch in both our names, equal and clear, with no question about your ownership. You are not my partner because I am allowing it. You are my partner because you earned it, and this makes it official." Natalie had cried then, not from sadness but from the profound sense of being truly seen and valued. It was a gift beyond price, that recognition and respect. By 1895, the HN Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. They ran over 400 head of cattle, employed 6 hands full-time, and had bought out 2 smaller neighboring properties. The ranch house had been expanded twice, now a sprawling, comfortable home that echoed with the sounds of family life. Thomas was 17 and already talking about staying on the ranch permanently, learning the business from the ground up. Rose, at 13, was keeping the books and proving to have a head for numbers that rivaled her mother's. James, at 11, had declared his intention to be a veterinarian, wanting to help animals in a different way than his parents did. 3 very different children, Harrison observed one evening. He and Natalie were in their room, getting ready for bed. It had been a long day and both of them were tired, but it was a good tired. They each found their own path, Natalie agreed. I like that we did not force them into a mold. You would never have let me force them into anything, even if I had wanted to. Harrison caught her around the waist, pulling her close. They were both older now, lines appearing on their faces and gray threading through their hair, but the attraction between them had never faded. True, I am very stubborn. One of your best qualities. They had been married 17 years, and the love between them had only deepened with time. It was not the wild passion of youth, but something richer and more complex, built on shared experiences and mutual respect, and the deep knowing that comes from building a life together. In the spring of 1896, disaster struck. A late freeze killed many of the new calves, and a bout of disease swept through part of the herd. They lost nearly 50 head, a devastating blow that wiped out months of profit. It was the worst setback they had faced in years. We will recover, Natalie said, even as she surveyed the loss and felt her stomach sink. We have reserves, we will be all right. Harrison was less optimistic. It is going to set us back at least 2 years, maybe more. They called a family meeting that night, including old Pete and the other senior hands. Everyone needed to understand the situation. We took a hard hit, Harrison explained. We lost stock and profit, but the ranch is still sound. We have good land, good water, and good people. We will tighten our belts, make smart decisions, and we will come through this. What do you need from us? Pete asked. Natalie spoke up. We need everyone to keep doing their jobs to the best of their ability. We need to be extra careful with the remaining cattle, watch for any signs of disease, and protect what we have. And we need to not panic. We built this ranch once from nothing. We can rebuild from a setback. The recovery was slow but steady. They sold less that year, building the herd back up instead. They cut expenses where they could without cutting quality, and they worked, all of them, harder than ever. By the fall of 1897, they were back on solid footing, and by 1898, they were thriving again. We survived, Harrison said one evening. They were out checking fence line, just the 2 of them, like in the early days. I was not sure we would for a while there. I never doubted it, Natalie said. We are too stubborn to fail. In 1900, the new century arrived, and with it, a sense of change in the air. The West was becoming less wild, more settled. Railroads connected remote towns. Telegraph lines brought news from across the country. The frontier days were ending, transforming into something new. But the HN Ranch remained constant, a testament to hard work and partnership. Thomas had taken over much of the day-to-day management, proving himself as capable as his parents had hoped. Rose was handling the business end, negotiating with buyers and managing investments. James was away at college, studying veterinary medicine, but he wrote often and planned to return to set up a practice near the ranch. One evening, in June of 1902, Harrison and Natalie rode up to their favorite spot on the ranch, a hilltop that overlooked the entire spread. They had been coming here for 24 years now, ever since the early days when it was just empty land and big dreams. "Look at it," Harrison said, gesturing to the view. The ranch house sat snug in its valley, surrounded by barns and corrals and fences. Cattle grazed across the pastures. The creek glinted in the evening sun. It was beautiful and functional, a place built with purpose and love. "We did good," Natalie said softly. "Against all the odds, we built something that will last. We did it together. That is the important part." Harrison dismounted and helped Natalie down. At 52, she was still fit and active, still capable of a full day's work, but she appreciated the courtesy. "I have been thinking about that day we met, helping that bull. I think about it sometimes too. If someone had told me that I would meet my wife, my partner, and my best friend all in one moment, I would not have believed them." He took both her hands in his. "You saved my life, Natalie. Not in some dramatic way, but in the way that matters most. You gave me a purpose, a home, a family. You made me better than I was." "You did the same for me," Natalie said, her throat tight with emotion. "I thought I just wanted the right to work the land. But you taught me that partnership, real partnership, is about more than legal agreements. It is about choosing someone and continuing to choose them every day through good times and bad. I will always choose you, and I will always choose you." They stood on that hilltop as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Two people who had taken a chance on each other 24 years ago and built something extraordinary. The ranch spread out below them, a living testament to what could be accomplished when two people worked together as true equals. In 1905, Rose married a lawyer from Cheyenne, a sharp young man who respected her intelligence and her independence. The wedding was held at the ranch, with what seemed like half of Wyoming in attendance. Thomas stood up with his sister, and James came home from his veterinary practice to celebrate. "Another generation," Harrison observed, watching Rose dance with her new husband. "It goes so fast." "It does," Natalie agreed. She was 55 now, her dark hair more gray than black, but her eyes were still sharp and her back was still straight. "But we built something that will outlast us. The children will carry it on. That is what it is all about, is it not? Leaving something behind." "I suppose it is." By 1910, the HN Ranch was run primarily by the next generation. Thomas managed the cattle operation with his wife, a rancher's daughter who was as capable as he was. James split his time between his veterinary practice and helping with the herd health. Rose and her husband handled the legal and financial side, making investments and expanding the operation in smart ways. Harrison and Natalie stepped back from the day-to-day work, though they still stayed involved. They were advisors now, the elder generation passing on wisdom and experience. It was a strange transition, learning to let go of the work that had defined them for so long. "Do you miss it?" Harrison asked one morning. They were having coffee on the porch of the ranch house, a luxury they had never had time for in the early years. "The hard work, the constant pressure." "Sometimes," Natalie admitted. "But mostly I am proud. We built this, Harrison. We took nothing and made it into something that will last for generations. Not many people can say that. No, they cannot." He reached over and took her hand, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. The years continued their relentless march. Old Pete passed away in 1912, at the age of 94, having worked almost until his final day. His funeral was attended by seemingly everyone in the county, a testament to the respect he had earned. Natalie spoke at the service, her voice steady despite her grief. "Pete taught me that loyalty is not given, it is earned," she said. He was loyal to my father and then to me and Harrison, not because he had to be, but because we treated him with respect and fairness. He was more than an employee. He was family. We will miss him every day." In 1915, Harrison's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that comes with age and a lifetime of hard physical work. He was 65 years old, and his body was finally demanding rest. Natalie watched with concern as he slowed down, moving more carefully, tiring more easily. "I am fine," he insisted whenever she fussed over him. "Just getting old. We both are. That is what happens when you live a long life." But she worried nonetheless because she could not imagine her life without him. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919. The children threw a party at the ranch, inviting everyone they had ever known, it seemed. There was food and music and dancing, and Natalie found herself overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection. 40 years, Harrison said as they danced slowly in the evening. His hair was white now, and he moved stiffly, but his blue eyes still sparkled when he looked at her. 4 decades of partnership. "The best years of my life," Natalie said honestly. "Every single one of them. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life instead of something easier?" "Not for a single moment. Do you?" "Never. You were the best decision I ever made, Natalie Miller, then, now, and always." The 1920s brought more change. The ranch continued to prosper under the younger generation's management. Automobiles replaced horses for some tasks, though never for working cattle. Electricity came to the ranch in 1923, a marvel that made Natalie laugh. They had started with a one-room cabin and a handful of cattle. Now they had electric lights and indoor plumbing and a telephone. "Progress," Harrison said, still bemused by it all. "We are living in the future," Natalie agreed. Harrison's health continued to decline slowly. By 1925, he was spending most of his days on the porch, watching the ranch operate around him. Natalie stayed close, unwilling to be far from his side. They had been together for 47 years, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. But she knew it was coming on a cool morning in October of 1925. Harrison did not wake up. He died peacefully in his sleep, with Natalie beside him, passing from one world to the next without pain or fear. He was 75 years old, a good long life by any measure. Natalie held his hand and cried, mourning the loss of her partner, her husband, her best friend. They buried him on the hilltop that overlooked the ranch, the spot where they used to ride to see the whole spread. The entire community turned out for the funeral, paying respect to a man who had been fair, hardworking, and honest his entire life. "He made me an equal partner when the law said I could not own land," Natalie said at the service, her voice steady despite the grief weighing on her. "He looked past what I was and saw who I was. He gave me the chance to do what I loved, and he loved me without trying to own me. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life." After Harrison's death, Natalie found herself adrift. For 47 years, he had been her constant companion, her sounding board, her partner in everything. Now she was alone, even surrounded by her children and grandchildren and the ranch they had built together, but she did not fall apart. Harrison would not have wanted that, and more importantly, she did not want it for herself. She had been strong her entire life, and she would continue to be strong. She stayed involved with the ranch, advising Thomas and Rose, playing with her grandchildren, living the life she and Harrison had built. On her 80th birthday in 1935, her family threw a party that seemed to include half of Wyoming. Natalie sat in the place of honor, surrounded by her 3 children, their spouses, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. The ranch was still thriving, still bearing the HN brand, still operating on the principles of hard work and fair dealing that she and Harrison had established so long ago. "Tell us the story, grandmother," one of the great-grandchildren asked. "Tell us how you and grandfather started the ranch." So Natalie told the story she had told many times before, but never tired of telling. She spoke of meeting Harrison while helping a trapped bull, of the partnership they formed, of building the cabin and surviving that first winter. She told them about the struggles and the setbacks, the disease that killed cattle and the freezes that destroyed calves. But she also told them about the triumphs, about taking that first herd to market, about weathering every storm together. "The most important thing," she said at the end, "is that we were true partners, equal in every way. Your grandfather never treated me as less than him, and I never treated him as more than me. We respected each other, trusted each other, and loved each other. That is what made the ranch work. That is what made everything work." Natalie Thorne Miller lived to be 87 years old, passing away peacefully in her sleep in 1942. She was buried beside Harrison on the hilltop overlooking the HN Ranch, the land they had claimed together so many years before. At her funeral, the family read from the original partnership agreement, that document that had made her an equal owner when the law said she could not be. "She was forbidden to own land because she was a woman," Rose said, standing beside her mother's grave. "But a cowboy made her an equal partner. And together, they built something that will last forever. This ranch, this family, this legacy, it exists because two people chose to see past the law and do what was right. May we never forget that." The HN Ranch continued to thrive, passing through the generations, always carrying the story of its founding. The story of Natalie Thorne, who lost everything to an unjust law, and Harrison Miller, who gave her back her dream by making her a true equal partner. Their love story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was quieter than that, built on daily choice and mutual respect, and the deep knowledge that together, they were stronger than either could be alone. And on that hilltop, where two simple headstones marked their final resting place, the wind still whispered through the grass, and the cattle still grazed on the land below, and the legacy of their partnership lived on.